Hey, it's Dr. Stephen Masley, and I've got a very special guest who some of you may have met before with previous interviews. It's Dr. Alan Christianson, who's now in Minnesota, and we can see from the view there, he's outside and got an awesome view from his place. Looks gorgeous, and he has a new book out, which we're really excited to talk about today because I think it can be very helpful for many of us to help focus, especially for those of us who are dealing with some hormone issues and hormone symptoms. So, well, I'll start off with a picture of his new book, a lovely cover. And so let's jump right into it. The Hormone Healing Cookbook. So what got you to write this first? I'm curious what, I've seen many of your books, but a cookbook, hormone healing, what's the story behind that?
Well, especially being asked by a chef, this is an important thing with your background. So yeah, the prior big three books all included a fair number of recipes, and they focused on adrenal health, on benefiting metabolism, on fixing thyroid issues. And everyone wanted more recipes, and people also wanted help with, it's funny because the word hormone, so as medical people, hormone means all the hormones, but to most of the lay people, hormones really means like estrogen and maybe progesterone, maybe testosterone, but that's what we really think about. So this is about how can you use foods to help these hormones and help them get better. And then also, here's a lot of recipes you can use with the other programs.
And nice recipes, I'll add. So
Thank you.
how do hormones change over time? Can you walk us through that a normal, natural progression and maybe even some accelerated progression some people experience?
Yeah, for sure. So they can be affected by just normal aging, disease processes can change things as well. But it's kind of odd. We think that our bodies have like planned obsolescence built in. It seems that we go through processes by which we almost deliberately, our bodies get less able at repairing themselves and fixing themselves. And some have theorized about, historical evolution and needing to have populations not get too big. So yeah, we kind of cull ourselves over time. And part of that change is the decline of hormones. So hormones affect a lot of things, but they affect the rate of cell repair. And when cell repair slows down enough, we age and things wear down more quickly. So that's the big part of it.
What are the top symptoms that you're, hearing from your patients and your followers?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this, and there's many, many symptoms, but in terms of the top five, and also ones that by themselves are important, but also ones that others can fall under, weight is always been the biggest one. And that can mean, gaining for no clear reason, or just can't lose it. Or if you do, it comes right back real badly. Fatigue. And this can be something to where for some, they can't perform well. They're worn out by mid-afternoon. Or if they do push themselves to exercise, they're wiped out for a long time afterward. Insomnia. And this can be not getting to sleep, not staying asleep, poor quality, poorly restful sleep, hot flashes. This is one that kind of surprised me in terms of just how prevalent and how common these can be. Yeah, Steve and his guys, somewhere around 40-50% of men can experience pretty troublesome hot flashes. Of course, women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, that's like the epicenter for them. But women of other ages, we can see much younger women getting them as well. And they're a nuisance, but they're also a medical risk. So that's a big one. And then finally, brain fog. Many struggle to where they can't really pull together their thoughts, or they've lost their enthusiasm, or they can't remember names or words. And this is a weird one, Stephen. I've surveyed people for I think about like a little over a dozen years now, and the brain fog one wasn't even a listed symptom, even by different ways of saying it, until about 6 years ago. And then it shot up into the top few. So yeah, those are the top five: weight, fatigue, insomnia, hot flashes, and brain fog.
So, and you're looking at using food as helping these. I mean, I can see some of it is because there's plant hormones and then there's phytonutrients. How do the plant hormones, from your perspective, interact with human hormone receptors, and how do you stimulate those in ways that help reduce these symptoms?
It's such a fascinating question. And there's a lot of theories, there's a lot of ways we think about certain active constituents in the plants. But ultimately, we know they can help, but we don't clearly know exactly how. One case in point could be like pistachios. They've got ridiculous amounts of melatonin, but yet when we consume them, it's not like taking a pill of melatonin. It's not like as we digest it, our melatonin levels spike. But when we do consume foods like them, in subsequent nights, our body makes a great deal more melatonin by itself. So yeah, you're right. They actually have some hormones. They also have things that can act on hormone receptors, like in the case of phytoestrogens. But there's a lot of ways in which they cause us to do better. They either help us make hormones more effectively or manage them more precisely.
So part of that is like a phytoestrogen, like from soy, can partially stimulate our estrogen receptors.
Yeah, and this is a fun one. And I really need to give a shout out to you on this one. So for many years, as a thyroid expert, I was kind of going along with other thyroid experts saying you might want to avoid soy because there's a lot of concern about it. And so your friends will answer your questions, but your real friends will question your questions. And you questioned my question. You said, "Hey, look, are you sure about that? Is that because there's all this benefit to soy?" And you shared with me data saying about how soy made a big difference for cutting bone issues, cardiovascular risk. And you said, "Hey, look, if they're avoiding that, there may be some cost to doing so. Please make sure that that's really necessary." So I took it to heart and I scoured the medical literature and I reached out to all my thyroid expert friends and I asked them, I said, "Hey, look, forward me whatever bad stuff you can find about soy." And I went through all of it and found that there really was no compelling evidence for soy being bad and tons of evidence for being helpful. So to your point about the receptors, it's pretty cool. It turns out that there's some receptors for estrogen that we like to have activated generally. And there's others that we don't want to be activated too much generally. So you think of almost like good ones and bad ones. It's simplification. But it seems like what soy does is it helps the body better activate those good ones that, grow thicker collagen, healthier bones, better brain cells, whilst at the same time, it inhibits the effects of the ones we don't want overstimulated, like those that would cause excess breast cells or those that would cause endometrial buildup. So it's a really cool effect.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just throw in there is like, especially for teenage girls, if they add soy while they're teenagers and their breast tissue is developing, they have a lifetime lower risk for breast cancer. So, I mean, it's just kind of fascinating how some of those benefits turn out in ways we never would have thought of. And
I hadn't seen that one before. That's really cool. For a while, there's even debate about how soy might affect those who have had breast cancer. And a big study was done not that long ago that took women who had had hormonally sensitive breast cancer and divided them into two groups. One was advised to consume a rather high soy diet, one was not. And those on the high soy diet had marked lower risks of recurrence and of death. It was just a
yes.
clear difference. So yeah, just clear benefits.
How do the phytonutrients work? I mean, a lot of your recipes are nutrient dense, just
Yeah.
loaded with, vitamins and minerals. And how do the phytonutrients seem to help the hormone balance?
This is really cool. So yeah, there's a lot of things we need from food, and some things we need are building blocks like proteins, or we need fuel like fats or carbs. And then there's cofactors we need for chemical reactions to occur, or parts of cofactors like the minerals and vitamins. So those are all essential nutrients. We now know that there's a lot of things that I hate to say they're not essential because they're so important, but they're not categorized as essential because we won't die without them. But our bodies really need them for healthy function. We call these phytonutrients. And the story is that these are accessory components that the plants used for, honestly, versions of chemical warfare. you know, Plants are always trying to maintain their territory and not have
Right.
other plants take over, not have bugs, eat them out. So plants are making pesticides, herbicides, fungicides. And over the long arc of evolution, we ingested these things so often that in the microscopic amounts and in the context of the whole food matrix, our bodies came to depend upon these. So these phytonutrients, for example, we can think about like glucosinolate from broccoli, and it's an insecticide. If you could
Mm-hmm.
take like a whopping dose of it, it would just cause liver damage.
Yeah.
But the microscopic doses and in the context of food, it makes our liver alert and it makes our liver stronger and more effective. So, and some there's some ways in which it's easy to think about these things as being used to boost our bodies or make our bodies better or to hack things. But more and more, the data suggests that we need this to work normally. I mean, we depend upon these for normal functions.
So how about the energy part? How do you see these as really, I mean, fatigue and being, drained at the end of the day? That's just so common. How do you think of when you're trying to create a recipe for food that you're going to boost people's energy with it?
Yeah, so for all of these, I really went to medical literature, look for high quality studies, and energy is a cool one to ask about. So specifically, there's a lot of good studies looking at people who had fatigue for various reasons. Common thing could be after chemotherapy. Other studies looked at fatigue that was not given an explanation, like in the case of chronic fatigue syndrome. And then yet still other studies looked at the effects of foods on the performance of athletes. So they weren't tired, but they wanted to create more energy.
Right.
And that's really not different than someone who is tired who wants to function better. So those are the three bodies of literature that I drew from to get this. And there's some pretty exciting stuff. Like one of my favorite examples, during the days of the big doping scandals in cycling, people they're doing blood doping. They were forcing their bodies to make more blood. They were receiving extra red blood cells, and that could boost their oxygen uptake by 10 or 15%. Well, we've got data saying that food compounds can boost VO2 max by like 20% or greater. So this is huge.
So what are your favorite foods for that? Let's be specific,
Yeah,
either foods or some of your favorite recipes. Which one would you really aim for if you were trying to boost your energy and you had fatigue all the time?
it was funny you ask about that. So I got a race coming up on Saturday.
Okay, good example.
and, and I'm loading up on beets this moment. Beets and oats are the two that I'm doing the most of. So beets, there have been so many studies about their effects upon athletes, acting on nitric oxide
Yes.
pathways, and super effective. It's pretty cool. What happens is there's some interaction between the food and our saliva that causes us to form compounds that make us better at utilizing oxygen. So that's the big one. Another one that I just love using in a lot of ways is our oats. There have been some big studies showing that those with the chronic fatigue that we think beta glucans are an important part of that, but really oats are the active ingredient in oats, but they've been shown to lower chronic fatigue symptoms by 50% in a matter of weeks for people.
Mm-hmm. Which goes back to from the times I've spent with you in the morning, it's always seemed like your favorite breakfast was like oatmeal, rolled oats, old fashioned oatmeal.
That's been a go-to for quite some time.
Now, the beets thing is, though, I was speaking at a dental meeting, and one of the people there was like an expert on, nitric oxide production. And it was interesting. They were talking about how if you were only eat beets episodically, rarely, you may not be able to get the saliva. It's the bacteria in our gingiva, in the saliva, that converts the nitrite to the nitrate that we can
Yep.
use. So if you only eat them rarely, you may not have enough of the good bacteria to make it that conversion. I mean, there's
Sure.
supplements and stuff you can take, but I would encourage people to eat beets regularly. They can't just do it 1 week per year, which is not what you're suggesting. But I just wanted to point out for someone out there I'm sure someone was thinking, okay, I could eat beets for 2 days a year if I needed to. It'd probably be more effective to eat them regularly and then do a boost before an event would be my suggestion.
Couldn't agree more. There's a lot of great food sources that can help in those similar ways, and a variety of those is great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, to be able to digest these things and get the bacteria that make these conversions in our gut and in our mouth, yeah, we want to be eating them all the time.
Well, kind of along those lines, there's also this emerging idea about all these different types of fibers that we can get from a variety of plant foods. And, many people get worried about various things in plants and they reduce their plant intake, which is pretty sad. But we know
Yes.
that the activity of our flora and how diverse it is, how well it works, it's reflective of how many categories of plant foods we're eating on a regular basis. So yeah, you gave one strong example about the gingival, the oral flora. And across the board, we need all these good bacteria to work well. We need a lot of variety of plants for them to do so.
And a variety of fiber. I mean, plant-based foods is really the key,
Yeah.
and the more, as you said, the more diversity, the better. So the bigger the variety, the better.
I try to always tag on fiber as plurals because it's a category. It's not a thing. It's not like you can
Yeah,
just have a whole lot of one kind and call it good. We want a whole bunch of different types in our systems.
right. That's a really good point. And then for menopause symptoms like hot flashes and night sweats, and what kind of foods are you looking at there?
Yeah, lots of good studies. We mentioned soy a bit. That's one of the one that has quite a bit of research on it. Back to the point about the flora, just like you said, we know that there's differences in how well people can convert soy and utilize that for those purposes. Somewhere around 50-60% of Caucasians can do a good job converting soy into a compound called equal. Probably like 70 or 80% of Asian populations can do that as well. So that's one. We also know there's a lot of data about figs being helpful. We think it's the 7-methoxycoumarin that's an important part of it. But there have been some big papers showing that we can see big reductions in hot flashes, but also low estrogen structural symptoms like atrophic vaginitis. And some studies showed like a couple of figs a day was all it takes. So it's not like crazy
Well,
amounts of
and
these
it's
foods.
summer. The figs are coming into season, so this is the time to be looking for figs in the market. So I'm
Nothing better
glad you
than fresh
brought that.
figs
And
when
I
you can get
love
them.
figs. So, I'm really
Yeah.
glad you brought them up. Other examples? So we've got soy, figs, there are a couple more.
A lot of papers on cabbage, actually several on women who had had hormonally sensitive breast cancer. They were treated, they couldn't receive hormone replacement therapy. And yeah, regular use of cabbage, even just like a
Mhm.
cup or so per day can be pretty dramatic. I have a lemony cabbage soup that I'm really fond of. It's an easy way to get lots of cabbage in your system.
Okay. Well, I actually, that's a recipe. I just picked the last of my cabbage. So I'm going to
Uh-huh.
try making your cabbage soup recipe
Great.
sometime here this week because I've got a freshly picked cabbage sitting in my refrigerator behind us there. So where can people get your book? Where's it available?
Wherever you buy books, pretty easy.
Wherever books are,
Wherever books are
Amazon,
sold,
Barnes and Noble, bookstores.
local bookstore, give them some love if you can. And
Wherever it's available. Okay, that's good to know. So, what else would you like to add that I didn't ask you? Any other key points that you want to share with our audience today?
I guess as an endocrinologist, just wanted to share the journey that I've made about thinking about these things. It's tempting to think that we can measure all of what's happening with our hormones and we can change things, we can add in, we can give hormones, and there's places for that. There's times where it's necessary and times where it's helpful. But we really know so little about how hormones are converted, how they're taken up by the cells, how they're eliminated. There's so much that goes on behind the scenes. And there's more and more data showing that if someone's taking hormones, even natural hormones, it's not the same thing as making them. Like I see this in the thyroid world quite a bit. There's a big difference between making it yourself and taking it, even if it's the same molecule. So I love the idea of foods as an answer because they tap into your body's own capacity. And I think probably early along in practice, I thought that this might be like, I don't know, foods could be something you could do to help a little bit, but it really wasn't quite as big. And I've come full circle on that. I think the exact opposite. This is like really the mainstay of hormone treatment is getting your foods dialed in and getting the right ones in your system.
And I can say from experience, when I've been in your home with you and Karen, one of the things I've noticed is this is how you cook. This is how you live. It's not just something on the side. And like the recipes in my cookbook that I've published in the past, they're usually my favorite recipes. I've got to assume many of these are your favorites that you're sharing with us here.
Let me tell you about one super fast. This is the ginger garlic poached chicken. This is the coolest recipe, Stephen. So you
Okay.
take you take a bulb of garlic, not a clove, but the whole bulb, right? And this is so easy. You chop it in half. You're all done processing garlic. Okay. Now you get about a 2-3 inch piece of ginger. It's hard to measure. It's different shapes and sizes, right? So you get a big knob of ginger. You chop it up into like 1/2 inch slices. You don't peel it, do anything. You're all done. And now you get a whole thing of cilantro. Just rinse it. You're all done. Quart of water, tablespoon of sea salt, get that simmering, drop in garlic ginger, drop in some cubed chicken and let it go for about 10 minutes. Now you just pull out those seasonings and that's it. It's phenomenal. It's really tasty. And I like to actually add in broccoli, jalapeno sometimes, serve it over rice, but it's the most insanely easy thing and it's really good.
Nice. Really glad you're doing this work and sharing with us, and really appreciate it. So everyone, once again, the Hormone Healing Cookbook by Dr. Alan Christianson. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really a pleasure to get to talk to you once again. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Wishing you all the best.
Thanks so much, Dr. Stephen.